It's sensitive.
Yeah. We do this multiple times.
Okay. There we go. So you see on the pyramid, the first tier, covering essentials, right? So that's basically looking at what does it take to keep you in the lifestyle that you're in? What are all of your expenses? How many of you have ever tracked your expenses? Good job. Now, do you track it regularly? Good. Now, separating your expenses between your fixed and committed non-negotiable expenses like mortgage, rent, food, gas, electricity, heat, right? And what are your lifestyle expenses? What is it monthly versus annually? And this is a tough exercise if you've never done it before, right? Because most of us don't want to know what we're spending our money on. But you become a little bit more self-aware. And this is the fundamental, especially if you're trying to figure out retirement down the road or saving for your kids' education, which are the two main topics that I was told you guys want to focus on. It's the same thing. You have to start from the foundation, which is your lifestyle. What does it take to keep you in the lifestyle that you're in? And then we have things like inflation that will impact that down the road, or actually right now, as many of you know, right? So what is my lifestyle? And ideally, we want to maintain that lifestyle or make it better, right? We don't want to go backwards. So when we look at what is it that I'm spending and what is coming in, what is my income? Earned income, right? Or maybe if you're already retired, you have Social Security. Pensions, as we know, are pretty much extinct, right? So looking at your income now and down the road, but really that's your cash flow. What's coming in versus what's going out. And hopefully what's coming in is more than what's going out, right? Now, once we do that, the next step in the covering essentials tier still is, do I have a good cash flow, right? Now, many of you have heard that a good emergency fund consists of 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses in cash, right? That's during your working years. You want to have at least 3 to 6 months. So this is going to be your cushion, your sleep at night money. In the event of an unexpected expense or an emergency, you have that available to you at all times, right? And some of us, we have good cash flow, but for some reason we're not seeing the cash, the emergencies. This is first before you even touch investments. You need that cushion, right? So covering your essentials, this is the key starting point. And when you're looking at your cash flow, hopefully, like I said, hopefully what's coming in is more than what's going out. And that gives you the ability to save, okay? Whatever is left over after expenses, now you can put towards savings or debt. Now, if debt is a concern of yours, sometimes there's different strategies with that. Usually, the paradigm has been, you have to pay down your debt immediately. You have to get rid of it. This is a very old school paradigm. But actually, especially, if you have a mortgage that's not in today's rates, but maybe like 2 or 3%, for example, this is secured debt and it's cheap interest. Why give the money to the bank sooner than you have to, right? So maybe your savings don't go extra to the mortgage, although, the stigma is, I can't retire until I pay off my mortgage, because this is what has been instilled in us. But actually, from a financial point of view, you can accelerate your savings instead with all of that cash flow. Now, once you've built the emergency fund, now we go to the next tier. How do we live the life that we want, right? And remember, we have to dream that up first. We don't just, decide on based on what we have. So when it comes to investing and saving into different investments, it's really just two things. This is the easy part of what we do, by the way. The hardest part is managing human behavior and emotions. Sometimes I'm a therapist, sometimes I'm a marriage counselor, sometimes I'm a psychologist. It makes it fun. But investments are the easy part. It's what is your time frame with this money? And what is your stomach lining in the market? Which is just fancy terminology for risk tolerance. Now, investments, we always like to use the analogy of, it's kind of like a recipe, right? I don't know how much cooking all of you guys do. I personally love to cook, but you need a little bit of each ingredient to come up to that target. But if you load up too much on sugar and not enough on flour, it's not going to come to that target, and it can actually make you sick in the end. Investments work the exact same way. You need a little bit of your stocks, you need a little bit of your mutual funds, your ETFs, your alternatives like real estate. You need a little bit of each. And sometimes the tendency for a lot of people, because of emotions, is to lean more towards one ingredient, right? So we first figure out what is your stomach lining with the market. What can you, what is your comfort level? Because in the end, you still need to sleep at night. And then based on that, we come up with that target. Now, weaved into all of this is tax planning, our favorite, right? So if you scroll a little bit, I want to just pivot, and then we'll pivot back to the pyramid. But this is our handy-dandy tax planning slide here. And we color-code it so that it's easy, because nobody really gets excited about talking about taxes, right? So if you look...
Except to me.
Yeah, except for you, of course. So hopefully this framework makes it a little bit easier to keep your mental frame of mind with where all of your assets stand from a tax point of view, right? So when we're talking about where you save, where are you saving from an investment point of view is important, but just as important is where are you saving from a tax point of view. And many of us don't realize these implications. So there's three zones, essentially three zones that your assets can be held from a tax standpoint. All right? Let's start with the red zone. Now, why is it red? Subliminally, red stop, right? Well, this is all of the tax-deferred assets. Things like your 401k, if you have a 401k for work, a 403b, an IRA, individual retirement account, a SEP IRA, so all of these kinds of accounts. All of that money goes in pre-tax, and you're getting a tax deduction. But when it comes time to take money out of that zone, it's taxed on the federal and state level. So why do you think so many people move down to Florida for retirement, right? No state income tax. Well, this red zone ends up being the largest, it's a predominant zone for a lot of people, because think about it, you're saving into your retirement plan in your whole career, and then you're likely also getting a match. So the red zone ends up being a lot of people's large zone, and it's good because you're getting the tax deduction, but at the end of the day, let's give an example. If you're in your retirement, you want to buy a car, say it costs $30,000. $30,000 today is probably like a Prius, right? And you take it out of the red zone, it's really more like a $45,000, $50,000 car after taxes, right? So this is where a lot of people get stumped in their retirement because they now haven't given themselves enough flexibility from a tax standpoint. So if you look at the blue zone, now the blue zone is still taxable, but not as taxable as the red zone. This is where you're taxed on earnings only, so capital gains, dividends. These are things like your checking and savings are in the blue zone, your money market, if you have CDs, maybe mutual fund accounts. Right, exactly. So this is where you're taxed on earnings only, all right? And then your green zone is the tax-free zone. Now, the government has limits on what can be tax-free. I'm sure this is a big surprise to all of you. And there's literally 4 things in this world that are tax-free. One of them is a Roth IRA, which many of you are familiar with. It's another choice for retirement savings. But remember, that has limitations as well. How much you can contribute, for example, and who can contribute from an income standpoint. And then college, right? College fund, the 529. That's another, if you're saving for your kids' education, usually that's like the #1 investment account that people go to for saving for education. But also that has guidelines and restrictions. You can only use it for education, right? So on that note, think about if you are a new mom and you want to save for your kid's education, and your kid was just born a few months ago, how do you know where your kid is going to end up in 18 years? Maybe they won't go to college. Maybe you can force them. But you might want to stick to something a little bit more flexible, because the 529 you can only use for education. Otherwise, it's a penalty for using it for something else. So these are things to consider, because the landscape, the whole university landscape is changing dramatically, especially after the pandemic. Some people are asking themselves, you know, do I really want to spend $70,000 a year on tuition if my kid is going to get virtual learning? You know? And then the other thing is, you know, is it feasible from a cash flow standpoint on your end to be able to fund your kids' tuition? Will that impact your own retirement security down the road? So these are considerations that you really want to take into account. And unfortunately, it's not one size fits all. You know, it's very individual to each of your situations. So when you're looking at all of that, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So now, with the 529 plan, that's one of the first assets that's looked at by FAFSA as well. So that impacts your ability to get financial aid. So tax-free account, you also have an HSA, which is a health savings account. You can only use that for health expenses. And then lastly, there's the cash value of a life insurance policy. So this is also an investment account that's inside a life insurance that you can utilize. So it's very individual, right? It's not something that everyone is eligible for. But those are sort of the ways that your assets can be taxed. And ideally, you want to have a nice balance in each of those, so that when it comes time to spend, which is the idea, right? We save to ultimately spend. You have some choices, right? So if we go back to the pyramid. So on the insuring lifestyle, we want to make sure that, you know, you first have your cash supply, you have your investments that are based on your time frame, right? So if you're a young investor, for example, you're going to have a longer time frame. So you could potentially take on more risk if that's your comfort level. One of the biggest, another stigma is, oh, I'm going to retire soon, and I need to make all of my assets conservative, because now I'm going to retire and I need to take my money. Wrong. This is the biggest paradigm that many people take on. But we're still retiring in our 60s, right? So again, going back to the question I opened with is, if you retire or you're thinking about retiring, what does life look like every day, right? If you're retiring in your 60s, you're probably going to live to 100 now. What are some of what is your structure, your routine? So this is beyond just the financial piece of this. It's looking at, what are you going to do when you get up in the morning? You know, we see this all the time, that people, they're financially prepared to retire, sure, but they don't know what they do. They don't know what they're going to do when they get up in the morning. They don't have, you know, especially statistically for men, they identify themselves with their jobs, right? So it's going to be so important for you to have a purpose, right? And there's essentially 3 things to fulfill that purpose. It's social interaction, other than family members, There's also physical movement, right? So being active. And then also mental stimulation, which is the most important because that's what you're doing in your job every day, and you're going to lose that. So even things like puzzles and Sudoku and words with friends, or those things that stimulate your mind, reading. This is why we have such an epidemic of Alzheimer's, honestly, is because, and dementia, because we're still retiring in our 60s, but we're living to age 100, right? So this is where, not only planning financially, but emotionally. What are you going to be doing every day? The best case scenario that we've seen work very, very well is weaning off it, right? So you maybe retire from your rat race job in your 60s, but you continue doing something that you love, maybe part-time, maybe some volunteering. So when you're thinking about your retirement, we create these buckets. Again, it's always about time frame. You want to have your now bucket, your later bucket, and your much later bucket. It's very scientific stuff. We try to keep it as simple as possible, though. So your now bucket is going to be, like I said, cash. Nothing fluctuating. About in the next 1 to 3 years, this is where you're drawing your income from. In conjunction maybe with your Social Security. You also have your investments, right? But I don't know about you, I wouldn't want my income coming from the stock market directly, right? That's too risky. So the now bucket is going to be your stable security. It's going to cover your essentials. And then your later bucket is going to give you some income, growth and income-oriented investments. If you've ever heard of, like real estate investment trusts or annuities, those give you income. And so that's more on the moderate risk. But the much later bucket is where you can stand to be a little bit more opportunistic. So that's maybe a 7+ year time limit. This is where you want to be a little bit more aggressive. Even if you're retired, you must have this bucket. And why? It's the only thing that keeps up with purchasing power of the dollar is investing in U.S. stocks. And so if we have that bucket that's keeping up with inflation, we now have a methodology of refilling our later bucket and our now bucket. And this is one of the biggest concerns is, am I going to outlive my money, right? This is sort of, obviously there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, but that's a basic framework of how to ensure that your income is coming from one bucket to the next. So that's on that piece, on covering essentials, ensuring lifestyle, obviously tax planning weaved into all of that. The next layer is preparing for the certainty of uncertainty, right? So looking at the what-ifs in life. If you're married, what if something happens to your spouse? Are you going to be okay? And the other way around. Have you thought about that? If you have kids, is your family going to be okay? Right? How about if you're alive, but something happens where you're unable to work and you can't have an income? How are you going to replace that income? And a lot of companies offer insurances to help with that. But it's always looking at, is that enough? Is that substantial enough to make sure that if something happens, I'm going to be okay, my family's going to be okay, right? One of the biggest risks, what do you think the biggest risk in retirement with the longevity? One of the biggest costs in retirement. Long-term care, specifically. We never think it's going to be us, right? We hope it never does. But I bet all of you know someone that knows someone that's in a nursing home right now, or that has in-home care. Those costs are astronomical. Okay? And this is where, if you're not planning ahead of time for these things, it could really deplete you. You could have a perfect financial plan fully funded for retirement, but then one of your family needs care, that's it. So looking at confident retirement is also preparing for the unexpected, the things that we don't think is ever going to happen to us. And then the last layer, leaving a legacy. So what do you want to have happen when you're no longer here? Who gets what, when, and how?
Who cares?
Who cares, right? You know, I've been hearing that a lot, actually. A lot of people are like, I'm not leaving anything to my kids. I'm spending it all I gave to my kids my whole life, right? But these are all of the things, so, you know, when you're talking about retirement planning, it isn't a one-size-fits-all. There is actually a methodology, method to the madness. It's still madness, but there's a framework that you have to start with the you are here part. What does it take to keep you in the lifestyle that you're in, right? I get the question all the time, Nina, how much do I need to retire in Connecticut? Well, how much are you spending? It's not, you know, some people are like, you need $1 million to retire in Connecticut. Well, if you're spending $50,000 a year and your friend is spending $100,000 a year, guess what? It's different for both of you, right? So it is predicated on your lifestyle. So I hope that's helpful. I know this is kind of a short visual and kind of looking at all of your, you know, the basic framework. Obviously, like I said, every one of you has a unique situation, but happy to hear any questions that you might have.
I'll start, so maybe other people don't feel.
That's okay.
So in 529, I agree with you. Like for us, like have kids growing and we are behind a little bit. Do you think it's still a good channel? Not knowing. First of all, I have no idea. Most of our professional parents are paying their own debt, student debt currently.
Yeah.
And then they want to secure something for their kids.
Right.
But 529, isn't it only $10,000 a year tax benefits?
There are it's
There's a
state by state,
Yeah.
and there are certain restrictions on how much you can contribute each year. The reason people do it is because it's in the green zone, it's tax-free. So why not build something else that's still tax-free so you can get that benefit? You want it to be tax-free because tuition is a large lump sum.
Yeah.
But on that note, something that I meant to say, and for some of you to consider, we work with clients of all ages, right? So from college graduation, when they're first starting out saving, to how many people in their 90s do we have? We have like 16 people, 16 clients in their 90s, right? And we found that the kids, and this is not science, this is just an observation, the kids that have a little bit of skin in the game with their tuition, maybe they take out a small loan, you help them, sure, but you're not doing the full ride. The ones that have skin in the game are more fiscally responsible, they're diligent, they're focused, versus the ones that, you know, if you pay 100%, and this is not for everyone, of course, but just an observation, you pay 100% of their education, maybe they take the 5-year plan instead of college for 4 years, and then they're not as fiscally aware or responsible. So it's something to consider. Not only does it help you from your own, you know, savings in the future, your retirement security, but it also gives them from some skin in the game. Yeah. Yes.
Question. So what's the difference between SIP IRA, regular IRA, and 401k?
Okay.
As a business owner, I have a business.
Oh, okay. Yes. So SEP IRA is a simplified employee pension. SEP IRA is only for business owners. Okay. And you can contribute, I believe, up to $60,000 or 25% of your. Yeah. This is a number that your CPA has to give you, and it allows you to deduct. Because remember, in the tax triangle, it's in the red zone. All of the three that you mentioned are in the red zone. Thank you, you're so good. We didn't even practice this. So this allows you to deduct more, but you can't contribute on behalf of any employees with SEP, right? So the SEP IRA is for a business owner who's pretty much a solo practitioner who wants a nice tax deduction. 401k is usually when you have at least, I would say 10, this is a guideline more than an actual rule, but 10 or more employees where you can contribute on their behalf as well. And this helps business owners from a tax standpoint as well. This helps the business. But it also, you know, it's an incentive for employees because, you know, they get a match from their employer. So that's why 401ks are very popular. 401ks, you can only contribute up to $22,500 if you're under 50. If you're over 50, you can do, I don't know which one you are, that's why I'm saying both. If it's over 50, you can contribute up to $30,000. So it's not as much, right? So that's the difference there. And then the last one you said was just traditional IRA.
Yeah.
So this is if you don't have any employee benefits, you're not a business owner, you can only contribute up to $6,500 if you're under 50, $7,500 if you're over 50. Typically the IRA, the traditional IRA, I call it like a Grand Central Station, right? So say you change jobs and you decide, okay, you decide that you don't want to leave your 401k at your previous employer. You want to take your money with you, right? So you could roll it over into a traditional IRA. Then you change jobs again, you bring it over to your IRA so that you keep your money, you know, consolidated. It's not all over the place and fragmented between your jobs. And this depends on, of course, what kind of work.
Okay, another question. So
Yes.
I have like 401ks with different jobs. Can I roll it over to my SIP IRA?
Okay.
Can I roll it over or no?
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
No. No, you can roll it into a traditional IRA.
Oh, okay.
And then you can contribute to a SEP. They would have to be separate. Yeah.
And I cannot touch that money until I reach 60, right?
Sorry?
When I can use that money?
59 and a half.
So 60.
I'm not even kidding. The IRS made it a half. Yep. 59 and a half.
He's almost there.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Can you go back to the tax-free growth?
Yeah.
And what investment makes you free?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
At what age?
The Roth.
The Roth.
At what age what? That you can take it?
You can take it, and then how much do you have to contribute?
So the Roth, there could be a Roth option in your 401k. If you have a 401k, there's a lot of employers are now doing that. They're putting a Roth option. But if you don't have that option, the Roth IRA, you can only contribute up to $7,500 if you're over 50, under 50 to $6,500 a year. Yeah. And it's technically, it's earmarked for retirement, so you can technically touch the Roth after 5 years of owning it, but only the principal, not the interest that you earned. Otherwise, it's 59 and a half.
Another question.
Yeah.
With Social Security,
Yes.
can the full benefit have to be 67, 66 now?
Very good
That's a
question.
question. What is the max you give it? Say somebody make 50, somebody make 100, somebody make $1 million a year. What is the max Social Security give it? When you retire.
So you can take Social Security as soon as 62. The full retirement age where your FRA is either 66 or 67, depending on when you were born. The max is when you're age 70, and it depends on how long your working tenure, right? So you have to be eligible for Social Security, you would have had to work 40 quarters. That's how
What is
it
the number? Is it the max you can get 5,000, 4,000, 3,000 a month?
Yeah, it's like 3. Yeah, it really does have to do with your working and how long you worked, what did you do, you know, and then don't forget, if you have a government job, right, there's something called a windfall, where you can get less Social Security if they know that you're receiving a pension. Yeah. I know, it's fun. The cap? Yeah, I mean, they just increased it, but then they also increased Medicare costs, right? So it doesn't matter, it ends up being a lot. How about from this side? This side is dominating over here.
Is usually there is a cap for the social security.
I'm sorry.
Is there a cap for the social security?
The cap? Yeah, it's based on your working years and
But
your.
there is a cap if you already work a lot, work it a lot, maximum. What is the maximum we don't know?
You know.
The maximum what?
If there is a cap.
The cap changes every year.
Okay.
It's indexed.
Do you know how much?
No.
Like a percentage of your income?
It has to do with your income.
Yeah. What is the percentage? 180, 70?
I don't think it's a percentage, it's a dollar amount. If there's a cap, it's a dollar amount. And it, you know, when we, Jimmy could answer that.
147?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's in the 3,000 range.
That's the average year.
How much?
147,000, that's after 147 you don't pay social security.
No. That's not his question. He's asking how much income can you
No, I'm asking about the maximum for payment.
If you must pay.
So if you make millions, you still have a maximum.
So think about it, with inflation, you know, it depends when you start taking, right? We just had a 5.5% increase this year. So the max this year is going to be different from the next increase and so on and so forth. So it just depends on when are you going to take it.
147.
Is it 147? Yeah.
Around
147.
Right.
Yeah. You don't take
Excuse me, Nina.
Yes.
I have a man here, he has a small business. ADB told him that with the SIP IRA, he has to add his employees to, he has to add people who work for him
Yeah.
on the SIP. But now you mentioned that SIP only for the business owners.
Pretty much, yeah. You can't
Yeah, she told me by law I have to add employees.
to the SEP.
Yeah, if you have employees, whatever you contribute on your own behalf, you have to contribute on your employees' behalf. So usually, if you're a solo, people want to do the SEP. But once you start having employees, you switch to the 401k because it becomes a very big.
Or a simple IRA is also essential.
So is it mandatory that he has to switch?
Yeah,
I wanna have-
well, you don't have to switch, but it is mandatory to contribute to, on behalf of your employees, the same percentage you're contributing to your own. Because otherwise it's discrimination and they'll use swap.
Which retirement then I can add without it adding money?
Do you have employees?
I have employees, yeah, but they told me they told me I have to add money. So I want to save money. So retirement then. If I'm gonna pay to my employees, I'm gonna pay for myself.
Right.
So it's not make sense to do, right?
Yeah. Maybe let's talk offline on that, just because it might be a personal situation. Like, I might have to look at everything just to see. I know. I wish some of these things are very intricate and there's nuances, and you might have to. I don't want to give like the wrong, you know.
Which of them the best of the plan?
It depends. So as a business owner, it's going to be very different from a non-business owner, you know, because you have more choices as a business owner. Depending on your tax situation and how much you want to deduct, you know.
I want to back to
I know you do. I know.
I don't want to pay.
I know.
But with chips, I have to pay.
They're not paying me, they're paying
No
us.
No mercy.
Don't believe in taxes.
It seems like we have a client who is an accountant, that you have a separate business. Maybe you guys need to do 3. to settle the books.
No, honestly, please, any of you, if you have any questions that you want to, take offline, I forgot business cards on the website. That's my shame as well. Yeah, the website, so, and then the 3-minute, that's a good point, actually, yeah. There's, on our website, if you go on opusadvicefirst.com, that's the name of our practice, there's what's called a 3-minute confident retirement check. It takes 3 minutes. I would urge all of you, no matter what age or stage, just take, and it will honestly blow your mind. It's all emotional. You don't have to know your exact figures, but the answers are more on how you feel about certain things in your own financial situation. So that's on our website. Opus, I don't have it anymore. Opusadvicefirst.com. OPUS advicefirst.com.
Or just go on your Nina.
Or you can Google me. I'm on Google.